Good afternoon. I'm Cristina Urias Espinoza. I'm assistant professor at Arkansas State University in Mexico. And I have a PhD in history at the University of Arizona. And I have a master in historic preservation and a BA in architecture. So that is going to shape the talk of today and how I see the U.S. colonization of Northwest Mexico. So today's talk, I want to begin saying thank you to the Latin Iberian Institute, Latin American and Iberian Institute here at UNM, and to the archivist at the Southwest, a Center of Southwest Research and Special Collections. And today the talk name is Everyday Life and Revolution at the U.S. Colonies of Northwest Mexico between 1910 and 1920s. That was my proposal for the Greenleaf Visiting Scholarship presentation that I'm giving today. However, I'm going to start presenting what is this project. I look at U.S. immigrants into Northwest Mexico and how they colonize several states in this region and how this is connected to the U.S. westward expansion. So over the last 2 weeks, I have been working at the Nacional Library here at UNM, and I enjoy working in such a beautiful location, beautiful library, and great documents that disclose a deeper side of the Americans' experiences in Northwest Mexico. So how I came up with this topic? Well, in the history of the U.S. westward expansion, the story goes that Americans went to expansion through the West, and as they colonized from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Some historians already have acknowledged that the south part of Canada is part of this big process. However, today, and this is the project that I'm developing as a book, few scholars have acknowledged that the westward expansion also reached the south of the border, which includes the states of Chihuahua, Sonora, Sinaloa, and the territory of Baja California in Mexico. So why this area has been neglected in studies? Well, probably because it was difficult to recognize, because it's such a big space, the geographical and cultural connections across these national borders, and also because this is the border between North America and the start of Latin America. Also because the immigration of Mexicans to the north have spurred the immigration flows of U.S. citizens into Mexico. And also because the scholarship that has developed in the topic, the search at these elements, focus on individual colonies and not in all these colonies as a whole. So I'm looking at trying to understand why this northwestern region, which is the states of Sonora, Chihuahua, Baja California, Sinaloa, and even some areas of Durango, interacting with California, Arizona, and New Mexico. Before 1882, it looked kind of like this, and suddenly, in the next 30 years, we see a boom of American settlements. One of those, which is my hometown in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. Well, it is very clear for me that what has driven this is the search for land. So when the land started to become quite expensive in the United States as the westward expansion reached California, the land market and the prices went disproportionate of what masses could afford, And this created a new border into these states as Americans were keep looking for cheap land. So this region and these colonies that you see here in this map is part of this immigration overflow that was stimulated by land speculation practices. And here is where my background as an architect with studies in urban planning comes out, because this is how I see this area, or what is the phenomenon that is driven these Americans to these colonies, is that to achieve this colonization, first we need a planning phase in which first Americans went after the even after, as soon as the Gadsden purchase happened, Americans started to move to Sonora, particularly that state had a lot of input of Americans moving there, and also to the territories of Baja California. So they went to explore and map this region. And when they located the best land, they decide or try and went to make arrangements with local and federal politicians in Mexico City to control this land, to get the agreements to buy the land, and also will, as we will see in 1883, to control this land through the Mexican colonization law. And it's after that year, after 1883, that is when the big corporations and Americans with money control this land, mines, agricultural fields, and even oil fields in other areas, will start to sell this land to other Americans in small plots by first promoting, advertising, and finally driven a new overflow of Americans into this region. And these colonies boom and attracted a lot of immigrants until the start of the Mexican Revolution in 1910. And that's when I see this disruption of the land speculation market, and finally the return of many Americans. More than 70% of those who were living in Mexico came back to the States. So in the late 19th century, this is how the colonies look like. First, I have a picture here of the most Mormon settlements in the state of Sonora, in Chihuahua. But other colonies appear in other areas like Ensenada, Ciudad Obregón, which was the Richards Corporation Company, and in Topolobampo and Los Mochis, Sinaloa. And these colonies grew and attracted colonists. And what I'm going to show you, or what was part of my research here at the Center of Southwest Research, is to look at two specific points. I came here looking for specific collections that would help me to build into this argument. So I look at the Hector von Baer diary, which he was an explorer. He is part of this big movement of explorers in what I call the first planning phase of the land speculation process, that they come to explore and see where are the best seaports in Mexico and the best land. And in the other documents that I'm looking is those who are helping me to build the argument on the disruption during the Mexican Revolution. Those are Hoban Meyer Historical Collection and Albert B. Fall papers. So here at the UNM libraries, I came across with this diary. And I was expecting to find a vivid description of his travels in Northwest Mexico, and especially in the Pacific Ocean. He is a civil engineer, a surveyor, and he was in the U.S. Survey Expedition between 1872 and 1879. And specifically, he was in Sonora and Sinaloa, and even a little bit of Nayarit and Baja California between 1874 and 1875. What I was expecting was find these vivid descriptions. However, I didn't find much. What I found was more about the work he was doing. He was very selective in what he was describing, just moving from town to town, saying what he was doing, the kind of work that he was doing, but in few spaces, and this is a very curious diary because he includes some drawings of the curious things that he find in this the Mar de Cortés, which is in the peninsula, between the peninsula and Sonora. So here, for example, in this drawing from 1875, he arrives to the port of, near La Isla del Tiburón, which is inhabited by the Seri natives, and he enjoys hunting with them. So we see some interactions with the indigenous persons and these American surveyors. Commerce is happening. He's describing, so it goes a little beyond what I'm looking for, but hopefully this can be a chapter or an article in another paper. This is something that I was not expecting, and even it can work or help for someone who is working on the life in the late 19th century in El Mar de Cortés. So how these Marines, how they see the landscape. He includes even drawings of the ship, the survey that he was doing. We can see two anchors here of measuring how deep was the bay in that area. He lands in Mazatlan and he says, for example, that it's too hot to go to the bay, but he like the indigenous peoples went in small canoes to visit the boat. And here is another piece where you can see, for example, here a shark and a kind of a bird, or ocean bird. So this diary is exceptional in giving a glimpse on how the Mar de Cortés looked like in the late 19th century, but what is given me is the security that Americans were there surveying, that Mexicans, when they saw them surveying, even he mentions that they were attacked by the Mexicans. They were throwing stones to them. Probably they knew what happened when Mexico lost the territories in the Mexican-American War, and maybe they recall and see, or they just think these are foreigners and they just wonder what they are doing here. So this is the first phase of when Americans are looking at this land as a potential place for colonization and richness. The second part that I'm looking for, that I found here in the archives at UNM, is those that complement my argument on the Mexican Revolution. So Northwest Mexico is the area of one of the areas of Mexico that had most of the battles during this revolution. And here you can see in this map that most of the action that happened in the Mexican Revolution through the oceans, and you can see here these red dots here in the ocean are U.S. Navy boats or gunboats. They are surveying and trying to control Mexico in the ocean. And this is like the gunboat diplomacy that happened in other places in Latin America. But here, clear in the map, we can see. But most scholars focus on what is happening in Veracruz or Tampico. So in this project that I have, I'm looking at what is happening in the Gulf of California and the Pacific in the Northwest region, which also you can see clearly that they are surveying this line and checking on. So, for example, I found here a collection of photographs of a worker of the Southern Pacific Railroad who used to live in the colony in Empalme, Sonora. And his recollections, he's using his personal camera to take pictures of the revolutionary activity that is happening in the area. So here is the Federal Army in 1913 preparing for the Battle of Santa Rosa. So some questions come to my mind after seeing these pictures. Well, clearly he sees the revolution as something that is clear, interesting enough to take his camera and take these pictures. At the same time, these are the pictures that are not made by reporters, are not Mexican reporters or not even American reporters, are common people, American colonists who have their cameras and are recording what is happening in the region. So when the Federal Army arrived to the town of Empalme, you can see this all big group of Mexicans in horses, hungry, coming with wives, children. And I was surprised because I've been doing research on this topic in several archives. I came across with diaries describing everyday life here in this town of Empalme. And this is the first time that I get to see what is happening in images through these pictures. Because one of the first complaints that Americans had when the revolutionary armies arrived to these American colonies is the disruption that happened. These soldiers come hungry and they just are taking the food of the Americans and the colonies. They also are disrupting the Pacific or nice landscape where only Americans live, enclosed. So here is the Southern Pacific Railroad, and you can see the cannons. Horses are also hungry. They need a place to be located or to be hold during the time that they are going to live there. And this is a picture of one Mexican camp that they are taking from these soldiers. However, this is only for the lower degree soldiers, the common people. Meanwhile, the generals, and this is one of the things that struck me because this is the big complaint that many of them had, is that the generals took the homes of the Americans in the colonies to stay there during the time that they were living during the Mexican Revolution. So here you can see Americans' homes in the colony taken over by the Federal Army. So now the backyard of the American homes have become the place to rest the horses. There are tents in the yard, in the backyard, people eating, sleeping, etc. So all of these recollections or vivid images that we can see from the revolution are highly relevant to understand everyday life and the complaints of the Americans during this time. Also, this collection includes some scrap paper and cutoffs from newspapers about how they felt unprotected by the American army and how they felt that they had no choice but to do what the Mexicans and the Federals or even revolutionaries asked them to do. So the second bunch of papers that I was looking for in the archives are the collection of Albert Befall papers. Albert Befall, and the UNM has the collection because Albert Befall was the first senator of the state of New Mexico in 1912. He is famous for the teapot scandal on bribery in the U.S. government, the first man to be convicted. And he's from New Mexico, so he had land here, so all his recollections and family papers are located here at UNM. But one part of this huge collection of 19 boxes is his investigation of the Mexican affairs, because he was the man selected by the U.S. government to do the investigations on what the struggles the Americans suffered during the Mexican Revolution, particularly in these colonies. So the goal, and I'm quoting, is to investigate the matters, damages, and outrages suffered by U.S. citizens in the Republic of Mexico. So I went through 4 of the 19 boxes that collected here at the Center of Southwest Research. And through these papers, I got the opportunity to understand a little bit better what kind of work Arthur Fall was doing to collect all these documents and how they got this information about the complaints of the Americans. So the first thing that it was crucial also to understand why he was chosen is because Fall got wide experience in Mexico before arriving in the revolution. I mean, after the revolution and even before. He was working in Mexico since 1883, which is the year in which I claim Americans started to arrive to Mexico at the age of 22. He was working in mines in Zacatecas. In the archive, I found his speeches before even being the one selected for to represent or to collect these complaints of the Americans. So speeches he gave in the Senate in 1914, 1915, and 16. And he's a vivid man that always argue in pro of the American citizens who are living in Mexico. And here's one of these exaggerated speeches that he used in the Senate in order to force or to promote American intervention in Mexico during the Revolution. And he says, I wish to call attention to the fact that the entire American colonies have been absolutely wiped off the face of the earth in the Republic of Mexico. Their homes have been burned to the ground, and Americans drive across the border, outraged or killed. And that has not been confined to any part of Mexico as any class of colonist. And here I think is exaggerated because he claims American colonies, in which from my research I only find one colony that was completely wiped up, which is Colonia Diaz in Chihuahua. That from diaries and other archival work that I have done, even the Mormons claim, Colonia Diaz was a Latter-day Saints colony in the state of Chihuahua, that yes, it was because of an American colony, but probably because they named the colony Colonia Diaz after the president Porfirio Diaz. So it was not just the target. They want to target Americans, but wanted to make a statement that they are wanting to destroy Porfirio Diaz regime by destroying this colony. So Fall became a collector of everything that every Mexican newspaper said about this dispute between the Americans and the Mexican Revolutionaries, that even a Mexican newspaper called that Fall was the worst enemy of Mexico at the time. And he was the one that will stand up for American interest in the country. But from all this paper, what is more relevant about Fall is that, of course, the main goal of Fall was to protect American property in Mexico. And the revolutionaries' goal was to take the land from the Americas and redistribute this to the patrons. At least that was the claim that it will take longer to actually be achieved. So, but, for example, I have this statement that I found in the archive of Albert Fall. The right of property has disappeared in Mexico, and no land owner considered his title violent. Land is now of no value in Mexico, and there is no agricultural credit, or if there is no any guarantee of possessions of land, and for any citizen or any legislation of justice. This is saying, in the rhetoric that I'm studying, which is the narratives of newspapers and what is they are saying about the American colonies and the American colonies, is by claiming that property has lost their value. We're seeing a clear disruption of the land speculation market, because land speculation, the whole goal is to create a market in which land values would increase. And by claiming in 1916 that property in Mexico has no value anymore, well, this is what I'm trying to conclude this research, is that this kind of rhetoric, claiming this, showing up the violence in Mexico in American newspapers, and of course by having no intervention of the American government in Mexico or even in these colonies, this closes a period of land speculation processes because land became without value. And despite the efforts of the many Americans that happened during the 1920s and even to the late 1930s, the American Association for the Protection of American Rights in Mexico did not achieve their goal. They finally succumbed to the loss of their property values in Mexico, and most of them returned back to the U.S. So I want to say thank you again to the Latin American Iberian Institute here at UNM. Thank you to Frances Chida, the director, Lenny Ureña, Liz Castillo, not here, and Samuel Cisneros, who was my archivist at the Center of Southwest Research. So thank you very much. I hope to come back soon.